Nick, let's talk a little bit about this week's Acolyte. Because it's the first time, and correct me if you disagree, or don't correct me, tell me if you disagree. It seems like this is the first week where people who are ardent protectors of the Star Wars faith, if you will, have been on social media, myself included, talking about, hey, you know what? Here's what this show is missing. And here,
Right.
like finding and not looking for negatives, not nitpicking, not throwing the grifter sort of mindset against this show, but really saying, like, speaking up again about what they think this show needs. Have you noticed that as well?
I agree. And I think it's the difference in, like, I think this is the first week we've seen some actual critique coming out of it, as opposed to, like you said, just the generic, complaints about, woke Disney Star Wars and, there's too many women. And this was the first time that we've seen kind of a broad spectrum of, this is what I didn't like about it in a more measured way.
Yep.
And there's room for that. And we've said that many, many, many times on this show, which is you're allowed to not like things. You're allowed to have issues with it. Where we've always run into an issue is when people are hateful or when they're assholes and, not having a basis or a founding behind whatever that thought is. Because I felt the same way. I've enjoyed the series so far. I don't know that I'd go so far as to say this is my favorite of all the TV series. I enjoy it. But this episode, for me, it kind of revealed to me, like, there's not a lot. I've seen a whole bunch of writing, it's bad writing. It's bad writing. I don't think it's bad writing. I think that's an easy throwaway thing.
Sure.
Right.
And it's usually coming from people who aren't writers, by the way.
Right.
Right. Yep.
I feel my personal feeling is the issue is pacing. Pacing and episode length is what's causing me to have issues with this.
Yep.
It needs more time, or it needs to do some things. I think you were the first person I actually saw that posted this on social media, but episode 3 and this episode could have been rolled in together as one. And I know part of the point was to show both sides of this experience, but you could do that in one episode. We've seen plenty of, Kurosawa style, saw this part, then saw this part. Like we've seen that in TV shows. Lost has done that kind of stuff, with flashbacks and whatnot. So I think that it could have been combined, but this was the first episode out of the whole series that I went, I need to rewatch it so I can talk about it tonight. And I wasn't motivated to rewatch it. Like I just super wasn't interested.
Right.
And now I'm worried about how much needs to get done next week and how long are we going to get to do that.
Right. And I think, honestly, the worst thing that has happened to this show is the fact that it's running congruently with House of the Dragon. Right. And again, obviously very different shows, very different, productions, etc. But when I watch House of the Dragon and I see a 55-minute episode that allows things to breathe, that gives you moments of just the camera sitting on a character who thinks about something or is dealing, there's a lot going. And let me be very clear. I think this is the best story of any of the live action Star Wars stuff that we've seen on Disney Plus, better than Andor. And I love Andor as a great show, but we know where it's going. It's a really good, see you later, Jordan. Thank you so much, buddy. We see where we know where Andor was going. And I thought Andor was fantastic, but I think this story has so much more impact on Star Wars as a galaxy, as a place to tell the story. But I feel like these 35 to 43 minute episodes are killing them. And again, it's not, look, a lot of people are like, I just give me more Star Wars. And I get that. And I would love to see that. But that's not why I want these to be longer episodes. I want them to be longer episodes so that they can deliver better. And yes, I agree. Well, I said it. Number 3 and number 7 could have been one good episode. Number 1 and number 2 could have been one very good episode. And again, I think for some reason, Lucasfilm has mandated that they need to be 8 episodes of a series. And what we're getting as a result is either stretching stuff out. I've said it 100 times before, and it will be the hill that I die on. I think and it's not just Star Wars. I think it's also the MCU series as well, and
Yes.
some other series. Writing and creating an 8-part story in streaming week to week is a skill set. It's an art form that hasn't been fully developed yet.
Correct.
And it's surprising because I think Leslie Headland, who did an amazing job with Russian Doll, I haven't watched the second season of Russian Doll, but I feel like you could almost sense that the hands are tied,
right,
for whatever reason. And it was an expensive show too, so there's not an excuse for budget either. So
right. Well, and I'd love to, and we need to figure out when we could do this. I'd love to talk to our friend Greg Iwinski about this, because I've heard some of this conversation before, and I think there's something to be said for a writer's room over 8 episodes versus a single writer writing 8 episodes. I also think that, and I've got somebody up here that I starred, I think Luke said, they have to stop fitting these shows into strict 6, 8, 10 episode structures. A bunch of the talk that I have seen online in the last day or two, and I don't disagree with, is it's become an industry standard, like you were saying. 8 episode, 8 episode Marvel show, 8 episode this, and we may get a second season. Otherwise, we call it a limited series and we walk away from it.
Right.
But the thing is, we saw Game of Thrones episodes. I think they were all 12 and 13 episodes, except for the last season. And one of my biggest critique with Game of Thrones, for as much as people didn't like how it ended, was I said, I didn't mind how it ended. It needed 3 to 4 more episodes to get to that ending. It needed to flesh it out and give it more time. They were running to get to the end. And we live in a world now where these actors and these creatives have the next project lined up, and they're on deadlines, and so they're rushing to get things done. But we grew up in the 70s and 80s and 90s and 2000s. My favorite TV show of all time is The West Wing. They did 7 seasons, 22 episodes a season, and it was an hour-long network TV. So when you take the commercials out, it's 45 minutes. 22 episodes a season. That's unheard of now. Like, we don't have anything.
24 is 24 episodes.
Correct.
And again, it's not even, to me, it's that, not the number of episodes. I think it's the length of these episodes, because never before have I felt more like they were like, okay, here's the story. It's I don't know. Let me do the math real quick. It's a 5-hour story, but we're going to chop here, and we're going to chop here, and we're going to stop it here, and we're going to stop it there. And I think it's really hurting this show. And I love the idea of sort of what I've loved. The best part about it has been the show ends, and I'm like, oh man, I can't wait till next week now.
Yep.
But honestly,
somebody
after
else
this
said it up here, and you said it early on, this is the one that should have been released all at once. This is the one that we should have been able to binge it.
Yep.
Because I think it would have held up a little bit differently if you could go ahead and jump in to
what's better yet. And I've been thinking about this a lot since I made some of my posts yesterday. This would have benefited from being a Netflix style major motion picture.
Right.
Disney Plus presents a Star Wars movie. Make this a 2.5-hour movie, and this works really well. Right. Do sort of a kind of a Pulp Fiction kind of thing. Bring the story back around and show the different things, and make it, spend that $180 million on one really good movie instead of forcing it into and honestly, I said it last week, Nick, you heard me say it, and I've posted it on Twitter. It's so important that this show lands the plane. And honestly, my confidence level is really low, and that sucks going into the finale.
All right. So Matt says this: there's no way to tie a bow on this season in a 35-minute finale.
Yep,
I agree.
You're 100%, Matt.
I know you agree. Here's my question to you: what's the minimum number of minutes you need for this to have a good wrap up next week?
Well, okay.
Realistically, obviously.
I mean, it's a good question, because if you could tell the story in 10 minutes, great, right? I think realistically it needs to be a 55-minute thing, because it needs to tell. Leslie Headland has said in a recent article that we're going to find out in this episode where the twins came from.
Right.
We need to find out what Chimere's story is. The other problem I have, why is my camera all blurry? It's like it's a direct correlation to the amount of alcohol I've had to drink tonight.
It's your beer goggles, not ours.
Right. How is that working? That's so cool. The big problem with this show, in my opinion, and I'd love your thoughts on this, Nick, is I don't know who the show is about. I have no idea who the show is. Is it Saul's story?
Right.
Is it May's story? Is it Osha's story? Is it May and Osha together? Is it The Stranger? Is it Chimere's story? I have no idea. And I think, you know, that was when I used to review and talk about the things I didn't like about the prequels is episode 1, whose story is that?
Right.
It's nobody's. And that's the problem with this show. This is nobody's story. It's lore building, and it's a cool story. Like I said, it's my favorite story of all the live action Disney Plus stuff. But it's so, how are you going to tie up a story with 4 protagonists potentially in a 43-minute episode, which is what it's going to be. It's going to be 43 minutes. That's my prediction right here. 43 minutes, and it's not going to nail it.
Absolutely. Well, let's do this. I agree. Oh, sorry, I missed it somewhere in here.
Whoops. Sorry. I just
quit hitting the button, Pete.
Stop touching things.
Andrew says, I really enjoyed the episode. And I would love to highlight that too, because yes, I have some critiques. I have some issues. I wish it was paced a little bit differently, but I'm still enjoying it. And I think you are too. So let me ask you that question, Pete. What did you enjoy in this episode? What were the parts that
honestly, I loved, I in hindsight, I love that it tied directly to it showed a different perspective of episode 3. I thought it was a really cool episode. I loved a lot of it. The Wookiee going full on.
Yes.
You know, what is it? Mad Claw, I think is the official term of when a Wookiee goes crazy. I loved that. I loved, you know, Mother Anastasia, you know, doing her thing. I loved seeing that May was driven by the dark side of the Force by Mother Core. I loved so much of this episode. Yes. At the same time, though, it didn't feel complete to me, and so I can't tell you what I. It's harder for me to tell you what I didn't like about it, but it's my least favorite episode. It's kind of a strange perspective.
Yeah, and I like this too. Luke says, I like seeing that neither side was right or wrong, and that's a great point because we spend. You know, there's a great article that was in Collider yesterday. I think Maggie Lovett wrote talking about, you know, this, you know, it kind of created some controversy about, you know, are the Jedi bad? And I think we had this question. This question's been around for a long time. Certainly episodes, you know, 1, 2, and 3, the fall of, you know, the Jedi, the rise of the dark side, the Sith, that kind of thing. It's not that the Jedi as a whole are bad. It's that people are flawed, and you've got people like Soul who's dealing with different things, and you know there's perspective there, and there's 2 sides to every story. And you've got Indara, who up to this point has been one of the sketchiest people in the show, but now you're sitting there going, maybe she's trying to keep everybody in line. Like it is, where are we? And I think that's part of what Leslie Headland does bring to this is you're never quite sure where the steady footing is.
Right. Yeah, and so this is the problem with the show, right? Listen, and this is let's take out all the really shitty takes coming from people who are literally making money on this show by being jerks. And I could list them here, but I'm not gonna because I shouldn't and I won't. But there are enough people who are making money on this for the wrong reasons. And yes, there's the argument that it's poorly written. That's not what it is. Nope. There are people who are saying that it's being driven by diversity and inclusion. That's not what it is at all. What is hurting this show is the pacing, and to me, it's the direction and the editing. I think again, look, people are like, well, you know, maybe they have to squeeze it down. A 45-minute episode is edited down from an hour and 5 minutes minimum. So there were shots that weren't used. There were pieces that weren't used to make this work. That, again, watch an episode of House of the Dragon. And, I mean, what works so well with first episode, season 2, I won't give spoilers, but I will say, first episode, season 2, House of the Dragon, I was like, oh, this is going kind of slow. And then the last 10 minutes, and I was like, whoa. And there needs to be more of that. And there can be. And for some reason, Star Wars live action television feels very small. And in the case of this show, they shot on location in many cases. but it still feels very small. And I think that's part of the problem with this as well. We need that big. I mean, you could go watch House of the Dragon in a movie theater. You could go watch Three Body Problem in a movie theater. You could probably even watch. I don't watch it, but my wife has Bridgerton in a movie theater, and it feels like it should be there. When I watch this show, as much as I love the story, it's 2 people on the screen. It's 5 people on the screen on a set. And it just doesn't have that grandiose that we need for Star Wars. And I think we're all, as a fandom, waking up to this concept that we need Star Wars in a much bigger thing. And here's the thing, it doesn't need to be a movie, but it needs to feel bigger.
Right.
Yes, Brian, and I watched it with you. Yes, I agree.
Well, I started to throw that at you before he said that. But so let me ask you this then, as a follow-up or a corollary to that thought. We need Star Wars to feel bigger. We need it to be. How does that bode, do you think, for the Skeleton Crew? Obviously, we don't have any idea yet what's coming, but this is going to be the next live-action TV series, and it's going to be focused on kids, and it's going to be. Do we think we're going to get more of that same small feeling? Do we think that we're going to, and we don't know, because obviously cinematography has a lot to say about this.
Sure.
What mediums they use. I don't know how much they'll use the volume for, Skeleton Crew. I haven't looked into all that, but overall, is it Major League and minor league? Are TV shows minor league baseball and the movies are, the big show in the MLB? Like,
well, somebody said it today. Somebody said that, I need a full meal. When I watch Star Wars, I need a full meal. And then my retweet was, Disney television series have become the tapas of Star Wars, right? And that's kind of, Jasmine, that is a great point. Bad Batch did feel much bigger than the Acolyte. It really did. It felt more galactic in scale, etc. But, and I'm going to contradict myself here, and this is why I think Skeleton Crew is destined to be great if you don't listen to the assholes online. My son, 11 years old, he has loved every single episode of The Acolyte. It's the first show. I mean, he liked Ahsoka, but it's the first show since Bad Batch and Clone Wars and the second season of Mandalorian where he has said, is tonight the night The Acolyte comes on.
Right.
So this is the show that he is excited about. So it's working for him. And I think Skeleton Crew will work as well. The other thing to keep in mind with Skeleton Crew is you have Leslie Headland has never done a movie.
Right.
Neither has Dave Filoni. And those are the shows. And the other big thing, the other huge thing is it's Jude Law.
Yes.
You have a major motion picture actor in this series. I think Skeleton Crew is going to be the best of the shows.
Yeah.
And I think it's because, Nick, you and I have talked about this before. There's so many Star Wars shows where you're like, do I need that story? And you're like, holy shit, that was amazing. And I think Skeleton Crew is going to be that. And I think, and again, and that's why maybe that's why as a fandom we're starting to feel a little bit disappointed in The Acolyte, because the story is so good and Leslie Headland is telling such a great story, but nobody's able to kind of focus on it. And as simple as The Mandalorian was, it worked because you could focus on it. You could pull yourself into the story, even season 3. Yeah. If you didn't love season 3, at least you were on the ride. Acolyte is tough to get on that ride. You know what I mean? So
I was looking back through here. Here's what Marianne said. Part of what was so great about early Mando was that it felt organic. Episode length was up to each director. And I think that's a great point. Just the organic nature of it overall. We get Carl Weathers. We get, we know Pedro, is a part of it, but we're not getting big name, star power. And not that the actors in Acolyte have done a bad job, because another one of the throwaway, I think, unfounded critiques have been, it's poorly acted. I really don't think it has been. I think that it might be that you just need someone else to help you sell it. I mean, Carrie-Anne Moss is no slouch. Lee Jung-jae has done a great job.
Oh, he's been fantastic. Yeah,
he's done some of the best non-vocal acting that I've seen in a while.
Oh
like
my gosh,
the look on his face, the emotion, like. Amandla is doing a fantastic. Like, I like the people that they've got in this, but it's just going to be interesting to see. And it may be that this is what we face every time a TV show comes out is, oh, it's not the same. And no, it's not the same. It's in a TV show in your house. It's not in a movie theater, which is why Pete's idea of put these up every Wednesday night for $5 at your local movie theater makes sense. But they don't ask us our opinion. So
they could. But you know, it's interesting too. And I think maybe this is part of the problem. The director of episode, I was looking it up while you were talking, the director of episodes 3 and 7, which were super critical stories in this show, was a South Korean filmmaker named Kogo Nada.
yes.
And he's known for video essays that analyze content. He's never done this kind of thing. And I think it shows, right? Again, I think these are great. I think those stories were really, really good. But maybe it's the wrong guy doing it. And no offense, I mean, because look, obviously
I can't do it.
I can't do it. So,
right.
But you look at some of the stuff, and again, even like Dave Filoni, and this has been kind of my critique as well, is every Disney live action show other than Andor has had the pacing of animation. And that's a bit of an issue, I think, as well.
There needs to be a little bit more of a transition, it feels like.
Yeah. And I think, I think, look, I'm not going to get on the Kathleen Kennedy train or anything like that, but I will say that maybe Star Wars needs to assess how you tell your stories, because whether there were the stupid complaints about Andor, from the bricks and screws kind of opinions of it, but Andor felt like a Star Wars movie every week. It felt, and that's why it is one of the most rewatchable of all the Star Wars shows. Right. I think the first season of The Mandalorian, because we didn't know about the volume when we watched The Mandalorian,
right?
And we bought it. We bought that illusion. I think the worst thing that happened is telling us about the volume.
Yeah, because then we started looking for the volume.
Right. And we saw it all over Kenobi. And I think that was part of the issue. But I think we're in a situation where I think The Acolyte is a really good story. I think it's got potential. I really hope, and Leslie Headland has said that this is not the case, so I'm confident in this going into next week. This can't be a setup for season 2 like Ahsoka was.
Right.
Ahsoka's biggest failure was not finishing that story.
Yeah.
That was its biggest failure.
Because as of now, we don't have a confirmed season 2, and so it's just hanging out there.
Right. Much like the end of Rebels, right? And that's a Filoni thing, perhaps.
Yeah.
If this show can land the plane, and I said it to my friend Rick Shue, who we have to have on the show sometime, but right now he's dealing with the hurricane leftovers in Texas. I said if they don't land this plane, it's a big problem for Star Wars television. And again, I totally discount the people who are going into this complaining about diversity and inclusion. That's a stupid place to start your argument. However, there is so much riding on doing the story right. They've put so much out there that the fans of the lore, my son, if this show ends and my son still is like, well, what happened to this person? What happened to that person? What happened to this?
Yep.
It's going to fail for him because there is no guaranteed season 2, and there shouldn't be.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my thoughts on this.